Anytime she goes crazy. Anytime she goes crazy. Don't let me
So good evening and thank you for coming. Before we get to our guest speaker though, I'd like to recognize some very important individuals. First, I want to offer a word of gratitude to the team of volunteers who have done a huge amount of work to make this event and the fundraising successful. My wife Susan, who does whatever is needed to organize things and who watches all the details. My mother-in-law, Susan's mom, Lucille King. She worked and continues to work tirelessly on correcting and locating missing information in mailing lists and call lists. She's really good at it on the computer. It's amazing. She sticks at it every day. Our campaign chair, Diane Peterson, along with Andy, who have secured the venue here at PCI. Also helped with the arrangements and have been tireless supporters year after year. So thank you. Our super volunteer for making calls and helping with numerous tasks, Elaine Golden. Our long-term devoted and detailed treasurer who's unable to make it tonight, Carol Wicke. Our event organizer and faithful volunteer coordinator, Sunny Story, and her husband Dan, who just left to go to another event. And to Ann Bromley. Ann Bromley does all of our data entry and enters the notes and things that we do as we door knock throughout the summer. And I also want to thank all the other volunteers. Some of you are here who assisted with communications and mailings. Robin Cash, Carol Ross, Sunny Story, Dan Slipe, Lucille King, Elaine Golden, Carol Wicke, and Diane Peterson. And I want to thank our union musician. Where did he go? Right there. Also available to the Democratic National Convention, by the way. He'll be leaving. Are you leaving Sunday?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I also want to give a special thanks to our sponsors, Bob Rush, Libby Slappy, and Charles Crawley, and Stacy Johnson. And to all of you who have made contributions to the campaign, I want to thank you. Without the financial support for the re-election campaign, I'd not have the capability to reach voters and audiences with the issues like those facing working families. Thank you again for your strong support. I appreciate it. Also, when our campaign team gathered to discuss our need for fundraising events, we wanted more than just a reception. We wanted supporters to have an opportunity to weigh in on the real issues that are facing the legislature. So we decided unanimously to focus on some of the key issues that constituents have consistently asked the legislature address. The plight of Iowa's working families was one of the top on the list. So after our introduction to the issues, we'll open the conversation here for questions. I'm sure our guest speaker would be happy to do that, and I will too. I'd like to have your input and your suggestions as well. If you don't have an opportunity here during this to get all your input, there's cards on the table where you can write me, or you've got information on my email, call me on the phone. I do appreciate input on any of these issues. And I will follow up with you. So tonight, who would be better to provide a format for this discussion than Professor David Osterberg? David Osterberg is a clinical professor of environmental policy in the Department of Occupational and Environmental Health at the University of Iowa. He served as state representative in the Iowa House from 1983 to 1998, where he served as the chair of the Committee on Agriculture and as chairman of the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. Later, he worked for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. Professor Osterberg holds a BA in Economics from Washington State University, a Master of Arts in Economics, a Master of Science in Water Resources Management, and a Master's in Science in Agricultural Economics. all from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. In 2001, he founded the Iowa Policy Project, which produces papers on the Iowa budget, empowerment of low-income Iowans, and improving our environment. His organization has published widely on Iowa environmental issues, and most recently, a series on Iowa's working families and the minimum wage. I'm pleased to present to you Professor David Osterberg.
Yeah, thanks, Art. I'm really happy to be here for doing what I think we should call Art's great idea, or Art and Susan's great idea, that you have an opportunity like this, and often you get together and talk to people you know. It's just fun. But it's also possible to take on an issue like the one I'm going to talk about today, which is the minimum wage. And does everybody have one of these? Because I actually have numbers on the back, and it's going to be a lot easier if you have that to look at. So we got involved, we at the Iowa Policy Project, in the minimum wage when we were approached by Rod Sullivan, who's one of the great supervisors in this state, in Johnson County, who was thinking about the fact that we cannot get the Republicans to move on the minimum wage. Branstad will not say he endorses it. Nothing is happening, and so they decided that, look, if Seattle can raise their minimum wage and Los Angeles can, a county can as well. And so we started doing that, and in fact, we produced papers for them so they could go forward on the political part and have information which we produce. We is actually Peter Fisher, emeritus professor at the university, who does all of this work. The work I do at the Iowa Policy Project tends to be the environmental stuff. But, so here's an IPP paper. And the first part is just the question of, okay, you want to raise the minimum wage. Let's pick a number. 1010 is the number we're looking at, only because that's what Johnson County did. Realize that 15 is now the number that's being talked about by everybody after Bernie Sanders started that fight. I think Hillary is now talking 15, about time. And so how many people, first of all, are affected by this? And so you look at first paragraph here, says that there are 18,400 people who would gain directly. And that's out of a workforce of something over 100,000. Now, and we're only looking at 100,000 because it may be possible that the state or national wouldn't do this minimum wage. They're not domiciled here in the county, so it's very possible they'll say, well, that's your minimum wage, but our employees aren't there in a sense, so we're not going to do it. So at least 18,400 people. And it would actually be more than that, because think about it. If you raise the minimum wage to 10.10 and somebody had been making 10.25, you know they're going to raise her wages above that too to stay in. So at least that many people would take advantage of it. And the first thing I want to do is disabuse people of this notion that somehow the minimum wage only applies to teenagers and it's just fine because they're just starting out, and by golly, 7 1/4, 10 something, that's plenty for us. That turns out to be just nonsense. There are nearly as many people who are over the age of 40 making less than 10.10 an hour as there are people who are teenagers. It is a wage that's earned by a whole lot of people. 20% of those have families, they have kids, and they're trying to get by on a minimum wage. So if we raise the minimum wage, we are going to have an effect on a whole lot of people besides teenagers. And if you want to go through and find out who it is that would gain, more women than men. Lots of people are full-time. Again, you can see the age. And the other thing that I find real interesting, that again you think, you know the minimum wage and who it really applies to, it would apply to not just people who have high school degrees. It would be people who are graduates of Kirkwood, people who are graduates of Coe College who could be making less than that. So when we talk about raising the minimum wage, it's going to affect a whole lot of people in this community. So minimum wage is funny because we raise it and then we forget it, and then inflation comes along, and as inflation comes along, the value of that minimum wage goes down and down because we don't index it. So you can go back in time and find out that minimum wage was much higher in the past than it is right now. Let's go back to that liberal Richard Nixon, who raised the minimum wage, and it went into effect over a number of times. So it became $2 an hour in 1976. He's still a president. Remember well, he's not the president, he's resigned. Ford's still the president. Jimmy Carter's about to become president. $2 an hour. What's $2 an hour worth today if you just take inflation? It's about $8.50, $8.47 to be exact. So, Richard Nixon's more generous than Ron Corbett. Remember that. That's how bad Ron Corbett is on this issue, if Richard Nixon is better than he is. So, back page. The back page is where there are actual numbers. That's why I have something in front of me. So let me show you how we go through this analysis. We don't say what's poverty rate and whether or not people are above it or not, because poverty is it's a ridiculous concept. It doesn't really reflect anything. It's a number that's good because we can follow it over time, but it doesn't reflect what it takes to live. And so, if you look at the very top here, I'll walk around here to make sure you know where I am. I'm right there at the top, monthly expenses. And you can find that if you are a single individual, your child care expenses are going to be zero because you don't have any kids, right? Then you ask how much it costs on average for clothing, household expenses, how much for food, how much for health care, because we're assuming this is a wage, this is what it takes to live as an American. Transportation, and that's a big number always, rent, utilities, we add all that stuff up and it shows what it takes to make it if you are a single individual. And the annual total basic expenses, and this is for Lynn County, by the way, this is not a statewide average, it's very specific to this county, $21,048. Now, in order to have that much, of course, it's got to be after taxes. So if you have that kind of income, is it true that you're paying taxes? You bet you are. Because we all pay sales taxes, and we all pay FICA and things like that. So they're there. So actually, you have to be making more like $25,000 in order to make that happen. So what is that in terms of dollars per hour? It's $12.37. See how we did that? So we actually know what it takes. It's not some concept that we did with a survey. You actually add up what it takes to make it, and it takes that much. If you look over and find out a single parent, and that's who we're very worried about generally, because we want to make sure that somebody who's raising a kid on her own, probably her own, is doing something so that kid's going to have a good chance for an education. There, the kind of requirements are going to be more like $20 an hour. 2 kids, more like $25 an hour. See where we're getting those numbers? That's how we know that $10.10 an hour is not an amount of money that's going to let anybody go on vacation. No vacation in here. Any place for savings? None. What kind? Are you eating steak a lot? No, you're not, because we did a USDA kind of moderate, I can't remember the term now, but it's a moderate way of getting yourself fed. Do you go out to eat? You do not. That's what it takes to get by. That's what it costs to be middle class in America. And these are the numbers. Now, we spend a lot of time, and the reason this is so busy, and I wish Mike Olin hadn't done this, because now I have to explain it. That's assuming that you're paying your own health insurance. If your kid is on Hawkeye, if you're in Medicaid, it's going to cost less because your expenses won't be as much. If your boss actually gives you health care, a lower number. So you can see that even those numbers, 1010, doesn't let you get by if you're a single individual. It costs more than that. If you have two people working full-time and they don't have any kids, you can get by on 1010 an hour. But that's about all the people who can. Middle class, minimum wage, I don't think. I don't think 1010 gets you to the middle class. It's going to take more like 15. So this is just background. I want to tell you this because I think it's important because you might talk to somebody and hear them say, well, you know, it's teenagers. Teenagers, what do we care about teenagers? It's not, damn it. It's not a teenager wage. It's not a part-time wage. People are trying to raise kids. 20% of the people under 1010 an hour are raising kids on that kind of an income. So, out of this comes policy. And what we think policy is can we get Lynn County to raise the minimum wage? And if we can, will that solve all our problems? Well, it won't. I've just shown you that it won't. But it'll get you closer than where we are today. Because if 1010 doesn't make it, think about what $7.25 does. It's so totally inadequate. So, you see who gains, you see why it's important, and you also see something else. That's the reason we need to have work supports. That's why it's necessary for the federal government to have what's called SNAP, used to be called food stamps, because people can't get enough money on this kind of a wage in order to get enough money for that food budget, and they have to go get some of it from a pantry someplace. Why we subsidize daycare? So people are able to work more because it's expensive to have a kid in childcare. Why we have rent subsidies, why transportation ought to be cheap, all of those things, because people need more support, and that's what we do as a society together, make sure that they have a chance of making it. Lots of more numbers on here, but it's for something you can look at before you go to sleep tonight, and it may put you to sleep. So, the very last thing on the monthly cost of selected items, just so you see where Cedar Rapids in this area, it's actually the MSA here, so it's Lynn and Benton and Jones County as well as Lynn, and we're a little low, we're above the median. No, we're not, we're below the median on transportation. Child care, where we fit in with the rest of the state. What's rent? And rent, $450 a month for a one-bedroom, $715 a month for a two-bedroom. Just, I'm laying those out for you so you see that these are actual numbers. This is what people face. If you get a two-bedroom for $625 a month, you're doing well in Cedar Rapids. You generally don't do that. It generally costs you more. So that's what I know about this, and I'm going to be happy to answer any questions, but note that the Iowa Policy Project does this kind of stuff. We do it because we love doing it. We did one for Johnson County, and then we did one for Lynn County because people here started working on that. In Des Moines, there's also another paper we've done reflecting the same kinds of things, but using data from that particular county. Sioux City we're working on, and we've heard that Black Hawk may also try to do that. So we're dedicated to raising the minimum wage. But we're dedicated to, first of all, showing you what the data, what it is, and why someone ought to be in favor of doing that. That's what the Iowa Policy Project does. And thank goodness we have a lot of formerly rich millionaires. The dead rich white guys are the ones that support the Iowa Policy Project. Besides Alan, who supported us for about 50 years. But if you want to keep this information flowing, when you think about giving a donation to Art, and I'm sure you're all going to do that, this is our address. Find us. You can get on our list, and we won't overburden you with that. About once every 2 weeks, we have something that we put out recently, so we'll tell you about this. But we love looking at data and turning it into stuff that might be useful to people. And again, when I write something, it's on water quality. Is a voluntary system of getting rid of nutrients, is that a good idea? No, it's not. You can go and see why we think that. Energy policy, we do that kind of work. But if you want to know more, come find us. If you want to give us a donation, we will accept it, because we'd like to have somebody besides guys like Andrew Carnegie supporting us. They were not very, most of these were not very good for labor, that's for sure. Alan.
I always thought that the earned income tax credit was one of the best policies for the poor, particularly for working low-income poor.
With kids, yeah.
And it was one of the few that seemed to have widespread support from both Democrats and Republicans. Lately, however, I've heard criticisms of the earned income tax credit, that it makes it easier for employers particularly, and the public at large, to justify leaving wages as they are. Is there any merit to that?
Everything does that. I mean, the fact that it used to be said that when you took a job at Walmart, immediately they would tell you how it is you get your kids in Hawkeye. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean we should give up on any of those things. But one thing about the earned income tax credit, which is better than many of the work supports we have. Often a work support will be, you get this kind of support until you reach that amount of income, and then bang, it goes away. So it goes away at a very low wage. So somebody can be getting child care support, and as soon as she makes another dollar, she loses $9,000 worth of benefits. That's a problem. Earned income tax credit does not have that problem. It goes up with income, levels off, and then goes down and feathers in. So, no, earned income tax credit, I'd say only good things about it. Yeah.
I wonder, when you're doing this, do you take into account tax policy?
Yes, we do. I mean, we specifically take into account tax policy when we find out how much money you have to earn to be supporting. And so we certainly do that. And we write a lot about tax policy because we have a pretty terrible tax system, as most people know. If you are a gigantic company, you're going to get huge benefits. If you're one of these big pork facilities going in near not Mason City, they turned it down, near Fort Dodge, you have 900 employees, so they erase most of your taxes. And how are you going to support a school when you do that? If you have 9, you pay taxes, 900, you get a deal.
The reason I ask is that a couple of years ago, the legislature adopted and the governor signed a tax relief for apartments for rental.
Yes.
And it goes down for 5 years. I think it just started this year. But the part of the rationale for it was to give the same tax break to renters that homeowners get, except the money goes to the landlord. It does not go to the people.
That's right.
Rents do not go down. So this was a windfall for landlords.
It was.
So how do we get that corrected?
Well, that's a different question. Ask Art. That's a political question. Is it a good idea? No, it's a terrible idea. You should not have done it. And I don't believe that most of the people who said, this is something we're doing for renters, actually believed they were doing that. They were doing it for landowners, for people who rent buildings. Yeah.
Push back on the wage side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of small businesses will let people go and won't hire as many people.
Yeah.
Do you have data on that? Or?
We do. We have some data, although it generally is for kind of smaller wage increases. I mean, we've seen in Seattle, a bunch of people were saying, look, Seattle's been losing jobs in the service sector since they raised theirs. It turned out to be an aberration. No, it hasn't happened. And it hasn't happened in big cities like Los Angeles. And the really good data, which you really get excited about, is if one state makes a change and they don't across the border, or it could be one county makes a change and they don't across the border. When you found a number of times where Pennsylvania would raise minimum wage and New Jersey wouldn't, or vice versa, find out if there's any effect. There is none. Now, those were pretty small changes, 50 cents an hour or so. But we're not talking about gigantic changes now either. And you might be able to find an effect if you raise it to 20 bucks an hour from 7, maybe. I don't think you're going to find much of an effect in these kind of numbers. And there is great data that shows that that doesn't happen. And those people who believe that are the ones that took my courses at Cornell College and didn't learn anything, except to say that, okay, there's a relationship between price and quantity, right? So you raise the price, less quantity. That's what theory would tell you, but microeconomic theory is kind of crap. That's why I stopped being an economist and started being a policy person, just because there are better articles I get to read.
I'm going to make up some numbers and tell you where I think version 2 of this should go.
Okay, good.
Okay, we're talking about a 10-10 minimum wage.
Yes.
I'm going to make an assumption that on a broad average, that's a $2 an hour increase. Okay?
Okay.
We don't know what that person is making. It could be $7.80. It could be.
Sure.
Okay.
Let's say.
So I'm just going to mix it up.
Okay.
For the full-time worker, that's 2,000 hours a year.
Yes.
That's $4,000 gross.
Yes.
Added to his paycheck.
Right.
Okay? Now here, somebody's going to have to do this on a calculator. I can't do this in my head. Out of 18,000 workers, roughly 50% of them are full-time.
Yes.
Okay? So multiply $4,000 times 10,000 workers and keep going through this graph. And how much is contributed to Lynn County?
Tax base?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay?
I don't know what the answer would be, but it would be positive.
Yes. If you have the basic information
Sure.
in this graph.
We could probably figure out what it would be given a lot of assumptions, but it's easier for total state and local taxes rather than just county.
Well,
Because,
you've got 18,000 people in this county.
yeah,
So
yeah,
what
but-
would that contribute to the county?
But I'm just saying that it would be easier to do with a tax like sales tax, which is statewide.
Mhm.
But we could find out what that 1% here is as well. Yeah, we could do that. And we would find it's a positive number. And so I suppose John, the conservative guy on the Lynn County Board, could you justify his vote by saying it's going to bring in more tax and we need more taxes?
Mhm.
He won't say that, but he could.
Right.
It's going to bring in over $400 million in more spending power, too.
Yeah, it is.
That's where I'm headed.
Yeah, more
That's where I'm
spending. So it is not necessarily bad for businesses.
Mhm.
If it's bad for any, it's people who would rather pay $7.25. And even McDonald's is getting away from that. And they're doing it not because they're wonderful human beings, but because they have so much competition. Same thing with if the state decides, doesn't apply to us, we're domiciled in Des Moines, they're going to find they won't get any employees if everybody else is paying more. So, changes like this are part of a revolution. And being a Bernie supporter, I like revolutions. Maybe one more question and then we can move to Art. Yes?
Well, I was wondering, you said you looked at data for neighboring counties where maybe one, or states where one had an increase and one didn't. And I'm just wondering, here in Johnson County, Cedar Rapids, or Johnson and Lynn County, we're two different counties, but we're also a part of one larger community. A lot of people commute. I myself commute to Johnson County every day for work.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you looked at all at maybe a change in the number of commuters who commuted to that county then that had the increase, and looking at maybe the negative effect on the county that didn't have
that
an increase in that they lost workers. I just fear, I think about Lynn County and keeping up with Johnson County, and I wonder if, eventually we would wind up having people commute for minimum wage jobs.
Yeah.
At $4,000 a year, as you said earlier, that's...
Even though it's a minimum wage, it's $4,000, and
Right.
that would certainly make a person think about getting a job in Solon rather than having a job in Mount Vernon.
Sure.
10 miles apart.
Yeah.
Good argument for the minimum wage. Yes, minimum wage, good idea. Art?
Well, I wanted to ask just a little bit about how we might handle it. I have some ideas myself, but ideas on this cliff effect.
Yeah.
All of these things would change, because if you get more income, you lose your heat and light assistance.
Yes, you do.
You lose your support for childcare. You lose your rent subsidies. You may even lose food stamps. So until you reach a certain level, and so there's
It
for some
matters.
people there's this gap, and so how to prevent that from another thing that the legislature would address.
The legislature would need to do that, and they should do it anyway, because the cliff effects exist whatever minimum wage is. It's just silly. You get another $1 an hour, and which would bring, you did the numbers, another $1 an hour times 2,000 hours, another $2,000 a year, you lose $9,000 worth of child support. What a dumb idea. And that's what the state does. Not Art's fault, but not my fault either. I used to be there, but right. You ought to do something about cliff effects, regardless of what we're doing about minimum wage. But you also ought to raise the minimum wage. Should it be done county by county? No. Would it be better to do it statewide? Sure. Go tell some Republicans that, and maybe we can get it as more and more counties then act. And finally, they'll probably come in and do something. They'll force the legislature's hand.
Well, I wanted to thank Dave for all of the data.
Yeah.
I mean, it is difficult to find reliable research data on these kinds of issues, because you get thrown all kinds of stuff that they'll pull on the legislative floor. So having that is an enormous asset. I want to publicly thank you for that, for doing that.
We love doing this work.
Right. I'm proud to say, too, that when I first entered the legislature in 2007, on the very first day, the very first bill, we raised the minimum wage. We went to $7.25 an hour. And how long ago was that? It's almost 10 years now.
10 years.
It'll be 10 years when the legislature meets again.
And the value has gone.
In the last 4 years, in the legislature and the House, there have been numerous minimum wage bills. I co-sponsor one with Bruce Hunter. There's every single year. We can't move them because of the House Republicans. So this will help. I must say, though, that contacting your city council members, your supervisors, to increase the minimum wage at the highest, 10, 12, 15, if they can move that up, that is going to help legislators see that we need to do something in the state, throughout the state. I do hope that that's a good policy. I'm supporting that as well, and that we can do something when we get there in the legislature.
Devin's done those postcards too.
Okay, Devin's got an initiative on that too. You want to say something about what you've been doing, Devin?
Sure, I'd love to. My name's Devin Mahaffey. Been working with folks in the community. Jason has been a big help as well, and other folks. And so we've come together to form Living Wage Lynn County, and we're working to raise the minimum wage above the recommendation from the study group that is currently $8.25. And so we have some postcards that if anybody is interested in filling out, what we're doing is collecting and delivering postcards from citizens of Lynn County to the Cedar Rapids City Council, the mayor, and the Board of Supervisors, urging them to please increase the minimum wage and to increase it more than the $8.25 recommendation. So we're urging them to look at a 2016 ordinance that will increase the minimum wage to $10.10 or above by 2017. So hopefully above, like Art said.
What's the timeline for that, Jeff? What if somebody wanted to take a couple of postcards with them? and
Yeah,
get some friends to sign?
if anybody was interested in doing that, that'd be great too. I can give you some contact information, and we'd be happy to meet up with you another time and collect them. Yeah. You can just talk to me afterwards.
On that same issue,
Thank you, Devin.
ICCI is also working in Lynn County with the supervisors, and this past Tuesday had a meeting with Supervisor Rogers and Supervisor Hauser to discuss. I was unable to attend, but they came away gratified, or at least not, well, at any rate, they were relatively pleased. But the information that I got was that Supervisor Rogers is working on forming a public hearing sometime in August to gather information that the committee that they assigned did not provide them because Mayor Corbett was instrumental in cutting their time short. So that's coming up here next month.
Another important thing. Before we finish, though, I wanted to just give some anecdotal stories. A couple of the experiences that I had is when you're looking at these kinds of things, I like to get people's input too. And one of the arguments was that they'll put people out of businesses, or they won't be able to hire more people. So one of the easiest things to do is when you're in a restaurant is to ask the restaurant manager what they feel, particularly in regard to tips and so on. So on 2 occasions I've done it. I actually haven't had a negative one yet, but on 2 of the most recent occasions, I asked one here in Cedar Rapids what he thought as a nice restaurant here. And he said, well, as long as it's required of everyone, all the restaurants do it in the competitive sense, then that's good. He said, that's fine. He said, well, 2 things will happen. He said, I will probably have better wait staff. They're going to like their job better, and they're probably going to do a better job. And he said, and not only that, I'm going to have thousands of people out there that are making more money that can come to my restaurant. So I thought that was a good one. One in Des Moines, we spoke, several of us legislators spoke to one of the managers in Des Moines, thought the same kind of thing. As long as it's competitive, if I'm raising them, if somebody else is raising those salaries, that's fine. And he did not necessarily think that it would cost that much more for him to do it. So if you're thinking about $1 or $2 an hour for an employee, work 40 hours a week, $80 a week. So they didn't think those are huge changes. They think that they could deal with, and many of them thought it would be great for their businesses, actually.
You brought up the tip aspect of restaurant workers, and I know that some large cities are trying to move away from tipped employees. Do either of you gentlemen have an opinion or any experience speaking with people about that?
I have, and it's definitely needs to be changed. It's not fair. There has to be some minimums on that need to be changed.
And do you know what the current?
I have some information. I can't tell you right off the top of my head, but it's really low. We're talking $2 an hour or less.
And is that the same, for instance, if there's a barista behind a coffee, like at Starbucks or someplace where you wouldn't normally tip, you're just taking the food away from the fast food counter, are they paid the same as a tip
It would
worker?
depend upon the restaurant and how they deal with that employee.
Okay.
If they're sharing in the tips, they could do that.
Well, I don't generally tip. I don't actually eat at McDonald's anymore, but I don't ever remember tipping at a McDonald's when I did. So I don't know what they're paid. They're restaurant workers, so I don't know.
They are the range, minimum wage range.
They're in the minimum wage range.
Yeah.
A lot of that would do
They're not
with
a
federal law. Niles?
What I'm about to compare is probably unfair. Carol's father is from Sweden, and we visited Sweden a number of times. And her relatives told us in advance that restaurant workers get paid living wages, and tips are only for very outstanding service and minimal amounts just to let them know you're happy. Do not tip normally.
Right.
1%.
Yeah, right. And those wages are, there was a big deal when Copenhagen talked about $20 an hour for a service.
We asked one of my cousins what a taxi driver makes, and told her, and told us, we kind of went in shock, and she goes, wait, don't you expect them to have a living wage?
Yeah, that's the normal way of thinking there.
That's right.
Too. The other impact is we have a lot of these assistance programs, and this will, if you want to take this route too, it saves the state money in terms of that. You can help a lot of other people.
So do you brought up the cliff effect.
Yes.
Have you looked at the numbers? Single parent with a child, if they were raised to 10-10, would they, you're telling me they'll lose $9,000 in benefits, so it's a net negative for them?
It might be. Again, it depends on what the legislature does. But I mean,
well,
yeah.
Obviously they haven't done anything yet.
Right.
So if they would have to actually do something.
they would have to raise the minimum wage, and then as they did,
Also raise.
also change those numbers. Or doing something better would be feather the thing in, so there is no a cliff wherever it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Reduce it, so you give an incentive for somebody to make another $1 an hour,
Okay.
however that works, more time or a better job, so at least that extra amount would make up for whatever they lose in those benefits.
Okay.
That is the way it ought to happen.
And then some opportunity to save something too.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, these are low income. I mean, look again, there is no vacation, there is no eating out, there is no savings. This is just what it takes to get by. We calculated it takes to get by. And, median, in fact, you look at the median wage, which in Cedar Rapids is 18-something. Even that, you're going to find, is not enough for a lot of people. Again, 2 people, no kids, they're going to be okay, but still it doesn't get to what a person needs who is raising a kid on her own or on his own.
And hopefully they're going to be okay, that they can get food from the pantries and clothing and the other kinds of assistance.
If they have
And that's
transportation.
critical. Yeah, and if they have transportation, get there.
There were some towns in Johnson County who
Yeah.
didn't go with the minimum wage. Any data to show that it was good or bad?
That'd be wonderful. No, that's a wonderful opportunity. I'd like to see that data, if you could find a difference. If
I would
all
think
of a sudden
residents
people...
in some of these towns
Yeah,
would move
but-
or change jobs.
Sure. Or if people started going to restaurants in Shoeyville because they didn't raise them and abandoned North Liberty. If the data's there, you could maybe find it, but I can't imagine it's big enough to have that effect.
Robin?
The scenario that occurs to me is that on the minimum wage, everybody's hoping that the state will do something so that the counties don't have to piecemeal it and so on. And sort of the scenario I'm looking at, nothing will happen in the next term because Republicans won't let it happen. But in 2018 session, probably will under a Governor Corbett. Because Corbett has signaled what he finds acceptable. An 8 1/4 will be acceptable to him, and so the Republicans will likely do that. And that's kind of where we'll be stuck in for another 10 years.
I'm not going to accept that. We're going to change it this next legislative session. I'm going to work on that. I know a lot of others are too.
Remember, Nixon more generous than Corbett.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.